They attempted to steal my freedom in my own garage. For men, black vests marked with cheap white letters reading HOA cop burst in like they owned the place. Before I could even speak, my arms were yanked behind me, cold handcuffs cutting into my wrists. One slammed me against my own workbench, tools clattering off the pegboard. Another pushed down on my shoulder like I was some felon. They didn't read me my rights. They didn't properly identify themselves. They just grinned like this was routine, like they'd done it countless times before. Before we continue, drop a comment about which country you're watching from and please subscribe my channel. Let's see how wide this story spreads. This didn't begin tonight. The roots traced back to the day I moved into Cedar Ridge. Patricia Moore, the HOA president, never approved of me from day one. She wanted people who agreed and kept quiet, not someone who saw through her schemes. And I saw everything. The fines she issued were fraudulent. The supposed bylaws she brandished were twisted for her benefit. She fed on intimidation, not justice. I wasn't going to let it continue. I told neighbors directly to their faces, "These citations are fake. Don't pay a cent." None of it would stand up in actual court. And word traveled quickly. Residents who once feared her letters started questioning, filing appeals, even dismissing her hollow threats. Patricia despised me for it. I wasn't just another resident. I was a problem she couldn't manage. She wanted me eliminated, and she wanted it immediately. The harassment began with notes stuck to my door, then escalated to fabricated violations for things like garage door noncompliance and incorrect lawn trimming. It would have been ridiculous if it wasn't so persistent. But then the intimidation took a different form. Strangers started appearing. Not board members, not neighbors, but hired muscle. They'd drive slowly past my house in dark SUVs, then linger far too long. I'd spot them hanging around at the street corner, black vests secured tight, radios attached to their shoulders, the words HOA cop printed across their backs in bold white letters. I knew it was just a matter of time before Patricia went too far. Tonight, she did. I walked into the garage to secure it when the side door burst open. Heavy boots pounded across the concrete. Before I could pivot, one seized my arm. Another shoved me chest first against the workbench. Metal handcuffs dug into my wrists, cold and harsh. "HOA enforcement," one shouted. "You're being detained under Cedar Ridge Bylaws Section 14. It was complete garbage, but they didn't care. One leaned close to my ear, breath reeking with arrogance. "The president wants you to get it. You either comply or you're gone. Consider this your final warning." Their leader straightened his vest, standing tall like he was judge, jury, and executioner. Non-compliance will not be tolerated. They thought they were in charge. They thought my garage was their battlefield. What they didn't realize, I'd been in tougher situations than this, and I'd never lost once. They thought handcuffs meant the end of the story. They were mistaken. My hands were secured behind me, metal cold and stinging where the links pressed into my wrists. The leader shouted commands to the others like he was directing a production. "Stand guard, search the house. Make sure he can't contact anyone." They rifled through drawers and shook tools, half expecting me to surrender, which is precisely why I didn't. Training isn't a collection of techniques. It's a mentality. With my shoulders pinned and my center of gravity pushed forward against the workbench, I lowered my weight, compressed, and stayed compact. In that confined position, the attackers had miscalculated the leverage. They assumed a handcuffed man was powerless. They'd calculated on compliance. They hadn't considered muscle memory. The first one came close to taunt and got his head within range. I planted my feet, rotated my torso, and used the momentum to drive my hip into him. Not a dramatic kick, but a focused shove that threw him off balance. When his weight shifted over my back, I wrapped my cuffed hands around his ankle and yanked hard. His stumble carried him forward, and he crashed into the toolbox, metal ringing. Surprise is a weapon people underestimate. It bought me a moment. I pulled my upper body free enough to hook an arm around the nearest loose board and jumped into a low scramble. The cuff at least allowed me to twist, wrist-locked control against an exposed forearm. My other hand, though restrained, could trap a throat or grab a jaw in an ugly close-range grip. The man who'd been sneering now tasted sweat and grit. His eyes widened as the world narrowed to immediate pain. They reacted sloppily. Two men charged me at once, thinking brute force would finish what handcuffs started. They hadn't practiced a sequence for this. I timed a shoulder drop into one, using my blocked wrist as an anchor to twist his weight. He sailed past, arms flailing. The other tried to circle. I hooked his leg with my foot, toppled him onto the garage floor, and rolled industrial oil slick and all. No flashy moves, just controlled, efficient strikes. Knee to thigh, elbow across collarbone, palm into jaw, short, decisive, and driven by survival, all while handcuffed. It's not pretty. It's rough and painful, and it works when you keep your head and use the environment. A metal pipe, a bench edge, the concrete itself, each became a tool I used against them without resorting to lethal force. Then came the sound that transforms any fight. Someone calling the police. Urgent crackling across a phone line. The leader cursed and reached for me with fresh desperation. He wanted blood in the story now. He lunged and missed. My elbow found his chin and he dropped like a stone. The last man tried to scramble away, but my trapped hand found his ankle again and pulled. He went down hard. Wind knocked out of him. Neighbors were in the street now. Flashlights, phones, a woman yelling that she'd witnessed them force their way into my garage and that she'd called 911. Lights flickered in the distance. I let them collect themselves for half a breath. Because you don't complete a takedown on luck. I pulled my wallet free with my chin, fumbled it open, and revealed the U.S. Marshal credentials I'd kept for identification. Not a threat, a fact. The metal badge caught the porch light and reflected a tiny honest gleam. "I'm a U.S. Marshal," I said low and steady. "You're under criminal arrest for impersonating an officer and committing burglary. Stay where you are." For the first time since they'd barged in, their grins froze. The leader's jaw worked. One of them started to speak. Protest, a lie. But the sirens closed the gap between bluff and consequence. The men glanced at each other at the approaching lights. And for once, they had no next move. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, hit like and subscribe because the story is only going to get better. The takedown's finished, but what's happening when the deputies arrive? That's the part you don't want to miss. The deputies pulled up with lights cutting through the dusk. I stepped back, hands still handcuffed behind me, but my voice steady when I spoke. U.S. Marshal on duty. The lead deputy took my credentials, examined the badge, and his tone changed instantly. "Get those restraints off him," he commanded. Within seconds, the steel clicked free, and blood flowed back into my wrists. I flexed my hands and steadied my breathing, nodding at the officers. Those men broke into my home, handcuffed me in my own garage, and claimed HOA authority. Everything's on camera. The deputies wasted no time. They lined the 4 imposters against the wall, handcuffing them properly this time, confiscating their fake badges and the binder of supposed bylaws they'd waved at me earlier. One deputy muttered, "These aren't bylaws. These are invoices." The silence shattered when their phones were seized. A forensic scan revealed message threads, orders written out clear as day from Patricia Moore, the HOA president. "Make sure he's humiliated. Handcuff him if you have to. He won't fight back if you look official." Another text. "Once he's handled, the rest will pay their fines quietly." When Patricia herself was brought in, she tried to bluff it out. "They acted alone," she scoffed. "The HOA never authorized this." But the deputies slid her phone across the table, showing her own messages glowing on the screen, her face drained of color. "Those aren't mine," she stammered. Except they were. Alongside the fake citations, auditors discovered her entire scheme. Inflated fines for lawn violations, parking tickets on public streets, even monthly security fees that were never deposited into HOA accounts. Neighbors who'd been too intimidated to speak finally came forward, waving receipts for hundreds of dollars they'd paid under threat of liens. The law was clear-cut. Under 18 U.S.C. 912, impersonating a federal officer is punishable by up to 3 years in prison. The state added charges for false imprisonment, handcuffing me in my own garage, and burglary for entering my property with intent to intimidate. Patricia's texts tied her to conspiracy, wire fraud, and racketeering. The 4 men who handcuffed me faced their own counts: unlawful restraint, impersonation, and assault. In court, the judge cut through Patricia's excuses. An HOA is not a government. You are not law enforcement. You abuse trust and authority for profit, and that night you endangered a federal officer. When the sentences dropped, the courtroom was silent. Patricia, 7 years in state prison, $350,000 restitution, and banned for life from serving on any board. Her hired HOA cops each pled guilty to felonies, walked out with permanent records, and faced years of probation, plus heavy fines. The county dissolved, the HOA entirely. A receivership took over, and the neighborhood finally breathed again. They tried to make me a prisoner in my own home, but all they did was sign their own sentences.